2025, what do you think the playbook is in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think it has to be this 3-stage funnel. The first stage is something very personal. If it's text or video from you as one of the company founders, leaders, your voice is more meaningful. That's a first touch. We also see that documents, if you put together like a slide presentation that teaches them something, anyone who interacts with that, great first touch. Then maybe at the middle, the second stage where someone's already interacted, maybe you're giving them deeper content like join a webinar, read this guide, a blog post, subscribe to our podcast, things like that. And then at the bottom, that's when we finally get to ask them to, hey, you ought to talk to sales and get a free consultation or a free strategy session, whatever you want to call it. If you do this 3-stage funnel right, it takes 2-3 months of getting traffic built up to where your bottom of the funnel is now starting to kick out leads. It takes a while. There's no shortcuts. But the nice thing is once you have this machine built, it really is a machine. You keep feeding, it keeps growing this bottom of the funnel audience who now becomes the reliable, sales ready, talking to leads out the bottom.
AJ Wilcox, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Paul, I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So today, we're going to do something a little different than we normally do on All That's Connected. And we're going to dive into a very, very specific topic around a specific channel. And we're really thrilled to have you because we picked one for our first pod of this type in something that's really hard to do well. And we're thrilled that you could join us because, LinkedIn is a challenging channel. It's a channel that it's hard to track. It's hard to work with. People spend money there. They don't always get the return they expect. And for many of us who are selling B2B or even B2SMB and so on, it's a critical channel. You have to figure out how to do it well. We've talked a number of times on our show about how it is critical for generating enterprise value to find a way to not waste money. So, in this case, we're really thrilled to have you because you've placed a lot of LinkedIn ads. I saw a number here somewhere, $150 million. Is that true?
Yeah, I think we just passed 200 million. I don't check that number super often, but yeah, I think to your point, LinkedIn ads, it's an ad platform just like Meta or Google where anyone can go and set up an account and it's free to do so. But I really think, maybe I'm biased, but I think it's the hardest channel to get right because we have the very best targeting that everyone wants, but the costs are high, which means the risk is high and the platform's not exactly helping you out. So I'm going to share, hopefully during the course of the interview, some things that are going to help you really not waste money.
Great. Well, let's start with how it doesn't help. I mean, and because LinkedIn is wonderful in a lot of ways, but say more about how it doesn't help. Why is it harder?
Yeah, there are 5 default options when you build your first campaign that the defaults are actually really not in your favor. If you leave them on, you're going to end up paying like $20 to $40 per click, is what we see. Whereas our clients, we're paying on average $7 to $8 per click. So really, if you don't know what you're doing, you get fleeced.
Got it.
LinkedIn thinks that they're giving you options that are going to be helpful, but really none of them are. Maybe there's a self-awareness issue or something there, but yeah, I'll help walk through it.
Right. So let's start with sort of before we get to the don'ts, let's start with the do's and some examples you've seen of things that have been really positive. So, you've obviously worked with a number of different types of clients. Let's start with it. If you have an example or a story about somebody who's been able to use LinkedIn, and particularly as a growth stage business, maybe not so much smaller, but how it really helped them to scale.
Yeah. The very first story I ever had with LinkedIn ads, I think fits the criteria really well. The last company that I worked for, this has been, 13 years ago. They were a pre-IPO SaaS company. And, I went in, I was the first digital marketing employee, with skills in search engine optimization and Google ads. And my boss, the CMO, is like, hey, by the way, we just started a pilot using LinkedIn ads. So see what you can do. And I jumped in because I didn't want to look stupid to my new boss. Saluted and said, yes, ma'am, and hopped in. And I executed the same kind of strategies for LinkedIn that I have used on Google Ads in the past. And within about 2 weeks, my sales team came up and said, hey, AJ, we're fighting over your LinkedIn leads. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. And I went, what? Like, what is there that's different here? And I kept investing. And I ended up over the next 2.5 years growing that to become LinkedIn's largest spending account worldwide. And so obviously it went from like growth stage to, serious growth eventually. But I use that as an experience to say, like, you really can start at any level. LinkedIn's targeting lets you hit exactly the right kinds of people who would make perfect customers for you. And that's the dream. That's the vision for what LinkedIn ads can become.
In that case, even at $7 a click, that's still expensive, but it isn't if you're figuring out how to move them through the funnel. How do you, when you guys are trying to figure out how to set up the right telemetry and analytics to understand how, going from targeting to click to landing page to result, how are you guys thinking about measuring your results, and how is that an integral part of being able to deliver a result for a client?
Yeah, well, think about the result that everyone wants. It's generally meetings with a sales team. Call it a demo, call it a consultation, whatever you want. That's what they want. We also know that if we go directly to this ideal cold audience who's never heard of us, if we put an ad in front of them that says, click here to talk to our sales rep, no one's going to click that ad. If anyone does, and it'll charge you money when they do, they'll have a very low conversion rate. If they do convert, like 80% of them just ghost the sales rep and just don't even show up. So we know that's not the right pathway forward. So what I do is I break this whole journey down into a 3-stage funnel, where stage 1 is your cold audiences that have never heard of you before. Stage 2, a little bit warmer. Stage 3, this is really where we finally earned their attention, and I've kind of earned that ability to say, hey, you look interested, let's hop on a call. And there are different metrics that I care about at each stage. Like at the top of the funnel in stage 1, I really only care that people are engaging and that they're noticing the brand. So a lot of times I'm sharing little short video snippets of, here's a quick tip, a trick, a strategy, an industry update that you'd be interested in. And so the things that I care about, I want to see a high engagement rate. I want to see a low cost per engagement. I want to see a high number of completions on that video, telling me that people who start watching it watch all the way to the end. And it's all kind of engagement metrics. But by the time I get to the bottom of the funnel, that's when I care about things like, I want to see my cost per lead or cost per conversion being low and my conversion rates being high. And the engagement rates on the ads telling me that I'm putting something in front of them that they care about.
Right. How do you work with companies that need that kind of content? Right. I mean, there's a fair amount of social proof and a fair amount of thought leadership, spade work required. So how does that work, or how do you recommend that companies approach that?
Yeah, it is a challenge. Sometimes I'll go to companies and say, hey, here's the kind of content that I'm looking for each stage. What do you have? And they'll go, we have a landing page with a form on it. And I've got to coach them through. All right, so now it's time to start creating thought leadership content that you're giving value to people without asking for something in return. And it's difficult for some teams to get over that hump of, oh, now I'm looking to create thought leadership content rather than just content to capture the lead. But it's pretty crucial. I wouldn't recommend advertising on LinkedIn unless you have a way of nurturing that audience.
So when you say thought leadership, I presume you mean sort of the old adage of like, no one cares about your product. They care about the problem they have and potential information around that problem. Say more about that part of it.
Yeah, you can think of thought leadership in a lot of different ways, but I think you nailed it. There's like a problem aware kind of stage where you can press on a pain point that they have for a problem that they didn't even know that they had. And now they're going, you're right. I do hate spending hours and hours doing X every week, and press on that pain point. You can have them be product or solution aware, where at least now they know that this problem that they have, there is a solution out there for them. There's content where you're talking tangentially to your product. You don't have to talk about your product or your service, but you're talking about the industry and showing them that you understand them. These are all great ways of thought ways of building content that they're going to love.
Right. So I would imagine a lot of folks who are trying to think this through. I mean, everybody's dabbling to some degree, I'm sure, right? And they have hopefully a social media strategy as well with organic content and so on. We hope that they do. But certainly that's an important aspect to this. And I presume that's complementary to what you're describing. Is that true?
Very much. In fact, if someone has really good organic content, they've already been testing, they've already found, here are the kinds of topics that when we talk about it, people pay attention. Those are total no-brainers to start with in your whole ad funnel.
Right. And I would imagine many of us who are looking at this problem, are spending money on Google, where we have a search term plan. Hopefully that's generating something through the landing pages. Describe a little bit how you take somebody has a strategy that's working on Google, and how is it different from what you would do on LinkedIn, and how would you make that transition?
Yeah, I love this because Google and LinkedIn really are polar opposites. It's the same coin. They're just different sides of the coin. If you're already successful using Google search, what you're getting are people who have high intent. They are searching for what it is that you do and immediately landing on a solution. But the really big pain point that sales teams will tell you from your Google leads is they'll go, we're talking to a lot of tire kickers and mom and pop shops who can't afford what we do. Like, we're an enterprise level solution, and we're getting, a local haircutting business contacting us. That's the challenge. LinkedIn is completely opposite. We make sure that our ads are only being shown to those who would be an ideal customer for us, but we lose the intent side, the ability of knowing what it is that they're searching for and what their main pain points are. So I think of LinkedIn as closing the big deals, the ones that you're going to be so excited to put their logo on your homepage, the larger lifetime value deals, but they're going to take longer to close versus Google. You're going to close deals super fast. They're searching for exactly what it is you do. You give it to them, you hop on a call and you do business. But you don't have control over who they are.
Yeah. Let's take a moment on, you said something I think is worth double clicking on. Google, LinkedIn allows you to target people specifically. Let's say more about building lists and how that process is working to figure out, your process for figuring out what the ICP is, and then the personas that are appropriate, and how is that list getting built, and how is that that list and those people part of a larger strategy? Because obviously we have to touch these people a variety of ways. So talk a little bit about list building and how you guys approach that.
Yeah. So you're going to have an idea. Here are the kinds of job titles that make a good customer for us. Like, that's usually what we do. We think about a job role.
Yep.
And LinkedIn has all of this great data about us because of our profile. We tell it what our job title is and what company we work for, and we list skills on our profiles. And sometimes we go and join groups. And so LinkedIn now lets advertisers target by, hey, this title, this level of seniority, these skills, this group, this department in a company. And you have all of these things that help you define what kind of professional someone is. And then they also have targeting that's like, what size of company are they at? What industry is the company in? We can even target specific companies by name, which is amazing. We've been able to do this ever since LinkedIn ads came out in 2008. And now account-based marketing, targeting by company name is kind of a big deal. LinkedIn's been able to do this forever. And you kind of combine both of those designations for professional, and now you've got an ultra highly targeted audience that you can work with. But then you mentioned lists, which I absolutely love. LinkedIn has this ability that you just can't get on any other platform. You can upload a list of individual contacts with email addresses and that kind of thing. You can do that on Google and Meta. It's not a problem. But we can do the same thing with uploading company names. So now you go to your sales team, you say, give me a list of all of the companies that we would just die to get in front of and work with. You take that list of accounts, upload that into LinkedIn and say, show anyone at these companies who has job title of CFO, show them ads. And now it's even more targeted than what you had before.
Yeah. When you find, so that's incredibly powerful, obviously. And if you have an account-based selling or account-based marketing strategy, it's an integral part, obviously. When you think about a company, let's describe a couple companies or a profile of a company that might be trying to do this, and how we might think about how they might go about running this type of program in conjunction with other things that they're doing. And one question that comes to mind that would be helpful to describe as we describe this company is, more precise targeting is much more expensive. Less precise is less expensive. How, when you're thinking about a particular type of company, how do you think about ways that they should make that, consider that balance? So I'll describe a company to you, and maybe we'll give this hypothetical company a little bit of free consulting, as it were. So we've got a $30 million B2B SaaS business that has sort of two levels of their product. They've got a lower end product, where maybe it's $15,000 or $20,000 a year, $10,000 a year, somewhere in that range. And then they have a higher enterprise product that's, let's call it $100,000 or $200,000 a year. And they're trying to figure out how to, and their ICP is executive level, right? They really need to, a critical component of this is not an individual contributor, even for the lower end product. It's integral to how the company is going to be run, and they need a champion, executive level champion. So how would you go about thinking about that problem?
Love this. Okay. So initially I would want to figure out what are those titles who would be a good fit for this. And usually with that executive level, CEO is a good candidate, COO, maybe CFO, and others. What I want to do is I want to build out, what does this total audience size look like on LinkedIn? And anyone can go and start a LinkedIn ads account. Anyone can build a dummy campaign just to explore the numbers. LinkedIn will tell you if you're targeting just the US, there's 250 million people in the US on LinkedIn. And as you add more and more target criteria, you're going to see that number shrink and shrink until you see what your total audience size is. So if I say these are anyone with the seniority of CXO at, let's say, in a certain company size, maybe we say you have to have 1,000 employees or more. We could define by industry and say you have to be in a tech industry or a finance industry, something. If I get this audience together, let's say it's 1 million people. Like you mentioned, the larger an audience is, the cheaper it is, and the smaller it is, the more expensive. But there is a happy medium here, because if I show 1 million people my ads, especially on a small budget, it's going to be like a trickle, like a drop in the bucket. Someone who might be a good fit isn't going to see the ads a few times. They might only see it once, and not everyone clicks the first time they see an ad. So, and then there's also a challenge of, what if you could customize the message where you can say, hey, CEO, you care about this problem because it hurts your planning, but the CFO, you care about this problem because it makes your books look bad and it's expensive. If you could break these up into different, I call them micro segments, where you have a campaign by role, then you can customize the ads and really speak to them. And you never want to get it too small. If you have an audience, LinkedIn will let you target an audience all the way down to 300 people. But if you're trying to spend on an audience of 300 people, realizing that most of those people aren't on LinkedIn every day. You're going to have to pay a ton for every click, and it's not going to spend very much over the long term. So I love it when my eventual audience becomes 20,000 to 100,000 people. And that's kind of my sweet spot.
That's interesting. Okay. And then when you're thinking about attribution here, right, for this problem, now we've identified who we want to target. We have clicks coming through. How are you thinking about attribution, and how are you linking that through so you can make the case that all of this is working as expected?
Yeah, I love this. All right. So every ad that I create, that my team creates, we have what are called UTM parameters,
Of course.
Tracking parameters on each URL, where I've got a spreadsheet somewhere for each account that we run, that if I see one of those parameters, I can tell you the exact ad, the exact campaign that was running there. So I think that's always really important. LinkedIn will do dynamic parameters, and a lot of the CRMs, like if you use HubSpot, it's connected to LinkedIn ads, and it'll just automatically put these tracking parameters on. So that's really helpful at the bottom of the funnel.
Yeah. And so you're saying, so it does matter what system you're using in the back end. I mean, and then you got to make sure that actually links to revenue and close deal and so on in your CRM system, right?
Yeah. Most CRMs, if someone fills out a form on your website, most CRMs have the ability to say, hey, pick up all those little tracking parameters from their URL and pass it into the CRM so we can tell exactly where that traffic came from. But something like HubSpot does that all automatically, which is kind of cool. But any CRM can do this.
Right. But so in that context, you're talking about what amounts to last click, really.
Exactly.
So, which certainly has value to understand that, but it's not a complete attribution picture, because obviously all of these things are multi-touch, right? You're going to have to touch people a variety of different ways. How are you guys thinking about that type of attribution?
If it's traffic that stays on LinkedIn, I get to think of it in a silo. Because LinkedIn gives us all of these cool retargeting methods for traffic when it's on LinkedIn. So I like to build this 3-stage funnel where just interacting with one ad passes them down to the next stage, and just interacting on LinkedIn with that passes them, to the 3rd stage. And so that entire journey can happen all within LinkedIn. And I don't need attribution at that point, because not all of that traffic is going to the website, but I know I have audiences. I can concretely see their size, and I can see how they interact with ads at that stage.
Yeah.
But then anytime that you are sending traffic to the website, whatever software you're using, or maybe this is just your analytics, as long as you're sending it with these tracking parameters, so you can at least tell this traffic is coming from LinkedIn ads, you can piece together that picture of what someone's user journey is, how many times they touch LinkedIn versus an email versus.
Yeah. Right. So your point, which we agree with wholeheartedly, is you need a mechanism to look at everything that's happening with this person. And because you've got to be able to do more complex attribution as you scale. When it's small, it's actually, we see something similar on the consumer side, which is, if you're running just Meta and Google, and you don't have, you're selling, you're essentially generating a transaction. You can see it all in one place, and then attribution's but there's a leakage problem as you scale, which is like, as we start to spend more dollars, what is really moving the needle? How do we think about what combinations of things are more likely to bring somebody to not only engage, but close? What's the value of that deal? All of that information is critical to begin for that next level, to make sure you're being capital efficient.
Totally. And there are platforms like Hyros and Dream Data and Hockey Stack that will try to, piece all that journey together and give you more insights. For me, since I'm wholly focused on just LinkedIn, I get to kind of live in that world of, hey, if it happens on LinkedIn, I've got data. Outside, not so great.
Right.
But what I do love is that any traffic that LinkedIn sends to your website, if you're running Google and Meta, you can retarget that, create a retargeting audience of just the traffic that came from LinkedIn, and vice versa. And that way, all the platforms are picking up each other's quality traffic and staying in front of them.
Right. So let's dig in a little bit more on what's happening in the LinkedIn universe. What beyond targeting, what are some of the other things that people should keep in mind to try to work with the LinkedIn's algorithm to deliver better performance?
Yeah, there's two big things I want to mention here. Number one is ads are able now to get more personal. To give you context here, all of the ads before about a year and a half ago, they came from your company. And if you can imagine how most of us deal in LinkedIn, if we're scrolling down our news feed and you see something from a company you've never heard of before, you're probably just going to keep scrolling. This is evident by the average engagement rate of an ad has been less than 0.5% since the inception of LinkedIn. We don't care about what a company is doing that we've never heard of. But a personal post does much better. We as humans, if we see someone we haven't met before or we don't know, we're going to be thinking, what's this person saying? Should I know them? Should I be connected to them? Like, who is this person? And so about a year and a half ago, maybe it's closer to 2 years, LinkedIn released thought leader ads. And this is where now we can promote a person's post rather than a company. And we've done this test. The same exact content from a company post versus an individual served to the same audience. The person is getting 10 to 15 times the level of engagement. And I think this is so good for all of us. If you start your engagement with a company with a personal relationship, it's so much easier to start a conversation than if it's, let me hit you over the head with a company until you finally recognize us.
Got it. So, and I presume this is for founders, this is for executives. They get out there. They may not feel comfortable doing it, but the return is there, obviously.
Absolutely.
And then you figure out what's the mechanism. If you get that engagement, that makes a lot of sense, by the way. We all humans want to talk to other humans. So you put the content out in the form of an ad, people click on it, and then you have a way to transition that into, so it what comes to mind is some founders like, I'm not taking all the calls.
Exactly.
What's the process for that? Say more about how do you actually, that sounds fascinating. How do you turn that into something that's practical and actionable?
And I think you hit it on the head. You as the founder, this is really uncomfortable to feel like you've got to be the mouthpiece of the company. You've got to record a video or type some content that people want to read. But the fact of the matter is you have more influence. You are more credible and you are a much better first touch with your ideal audience than anything your marketing team could put together. The very highest performing ad that we see on LinkedIn right now is what we call a talking head. It's a post from you as one of the executives where it's a video. You're just giving a quick tip, a trick, a strategy, 20 to 40 seconds long. Maybe it's an update to the industry that they really should know about. And then you post that on your LinkedIn profile, and then your marketing team promotes that post to your ideal audience. Then just like you said, we can set up retargeting that says anyone who watches at least 75% of one of these videos or 50%, now let's target them with company level things because they now will recognize who we are. And now it's people care about your post because it's thought leadership content, but you're not the one they're expecting to hop on a call. It's just the pure engagement on your post that then triggers them to start seeing your deeper ads that start inviting them to do deeper activities with your company.
So just to take that example, you put out this snippet, 20 to 40 seconds from the founder, from the CEO, from the CMO, whoever, and then somebody is engaging on that, and then you're following with the company ad. What's the click rate at that point on that company ad post the first? I presume it's better.
Yeah, it gets better. Every touch that you move down the funnel, engagement rates get better and better. So if you were to take a company post, let's say it's pointing to people to a podcast episode or a webinar, or here's a cool blog post we just wrote. Dropping someone there, you can expect to have a little less than 0.5% click-through rate. But we find that when we do the same kind of offer after an interaction with an individual from the company, especially founder executive leadership, you'll see that engagement rate increase by 20, 30, 40%. And it keeps going all the way down the funnel. So if you get to a third stage, now you're seeing things around a 1% click-through rate, and you're seeing conversion rates 5 times higher at stage 3. That means the third touch with the company than they were just at stage 2. So we're showing how just by the metrics and the rise in them, you can see how people are getting more and more educated, more and more qualified, and more interested.
Yeah. Really interesting. When you're thinking about folks who are getting started and thinking about their mix of investment, how do you advise folks to do this in the context of the other things that that are part of a traditional marketing mix for companies of this that would be using LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, I would look at what your other channels are doing. If you have a really successful Meta or a really successful Google program, you don't want to take from those, but you may also realize a lot of the leads being generated over here aren't the right people. And I know with LinkedIn, I can reach the right people. So I would say start with a budget of between about 5,000 to 10,000 to start. If you go much less than 5,000 a month, I found sometimes you just don't get enough data by the end of a month to tell whether it's working or not.
Got it.
So I like that 5,000 range, and just start over there, test a little bit, and realize that this is a long-term approach, because it's going to take weeks, months, sometimes several months to take this cold traffic who's never heard of you and warm them up to the point where now they're willing to hop on a call. So you can't judge LinkedIn as a channel or any other channel just because, it's been a month and we didn't get a closed deal, scrap it.
Yeah. Are you finding this works for executives? I mean, nobody picks up the phone anymore. Nobody's in the office anyway. People are not reading email, and executives generally are notorious, me included, being pretty it's pretty tough to get to me. So how do you think about that problem? And have you found with clients that targeting executives can work?
Yeah. Everyone says CEOs are not on LinkedIn. They're too busy. But for whatever reason, that's not the truth. We can tell when we target people, we can see that they are clicking. We can see their level of engagement compared to others. And we find that CEOs do just as much interaction as other employees. So it's not the case, but I think everyone should test it for their own audience.
Right. Right. Well, and it does come back to this, the primary thing, which if you can't put it in the context of a problem that is perceived by the person you're targeting, you can't expect much in terms of engagement, because, everybody's busy and they've got a problem they're trying to solve. And if they can't solve that problem, then they're going to go somewhere where they can, and I, it's funny. I have this, even having done this for an incredibly long time, there are many things that are still a mystery to me. And, our process whereby we try to educate ourselves so we can be intelligent about how to fix that problem includes a lot of clicking around and talking to people and again, consuming more and more content. I mean, in my case, it's generally written, videos less so, but it's such a powerful thing when, and it's a deep sense of relief. It's an emotional thing, right? When you're just like, this is urgent. I have to figure this out. And you find a solution that's going to help you get there.
Yeah.
That's a good feeling.
Well, and I find that executive leadership, they tend to be the most self-aware and the most interested in self-improvement. And so if your ads are teaching them hey, you can get better at this, this can be better for you, have less stress in your life because you've got this problem under control, of course, they're going to be just as open, if not more open to it than a lower level employee.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, and ostensibly they have more agency too. Maybe they have more control over budget, but so help me understand that you've had your agency for now how many years? How long?
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years. And so you've worked with dozens, hundreds of clients. I don't know. A
Oh
lot.
yeah. I think we're over 1,000 at this point. It's
Over 1,000
pretty wild.
clients. Okay. And is it primarily tech, or is it all over the place?
We skew pretty heavily towards B2B SaaS. Probably 90% of all the spend we've ever done has been in B2B. SaaS is probably the majority of that. But we have seen B2B products and, other services like one-time services work. Just so happens that SaaS tend to be the growth people who are kind of leading the charge and figuring things out.
Yep.
We've also done a great deal of, in the B2C realm, the recruiting. LinkedIn was kind of at its basics. It used to be a recruiting platform. So recruiting for positions that you have open is amazing. Higher ed is technically a B2C activity of like, hey, we're an MBA program. We want to, have you come get your part-time MBA or something.
Yep.
And several other little areas of B2C that are kind of pockets, but the vast majority of B2B for sure.
Right. So, here we are in 25. It ain't 21, right? The money is tighter than it was. B2B close rates in the industry as a whole are stressed. It's not as easy to go find a client anymore, and people are much more scrutinizing budgets much more carefully. I mean, it's not the freewheeling days. How has that changed your business, and what have you found is a secret ingredient to help your clients in this environment succeed on LinkedIn?
It's funny, when I started the company over 10 years ago, most people didn't know that LinkedIn ads existed. And sometimes I'd have to explain to someone what LinkedIn was for them to get it. And over time, when I very first started, cost per click on average was like $2. And now it's $10 to $16. And costs only rise when competition has come. So I can see what's happened, especially in the last 3 years. We have this hockey stick effect where it seems like every B2B company has finally thrown up their hands and said, all right, we get it. We have to be on LinkedIn. We have to figure this out. So as competition is rising, more and more business to business types of organizations realize they have to be there. They're making the investment to figure it out, which is great for us. The other thing is that on all these other channels, because they can't specify exactly the right audience, at some point, it feels like a bit of a spray and pray mentality of, let me just hope that Meta can find the right people. Let me hope that the right people are searching for keywords on Google. But LinkedIn is the one platform that you can get your ads in front of exactly the right people.
Got it.
Even though people have been pulling back budgets, we still keep seeing LinkedIn grow and grow and grow on the ad side. And I think it's just from that, people realize they have to get it figured out. And if you can figure it out now and get your costs, down 20, 30% because you've found efficiencies, you're going to be paying 20, 30% less than your competitors will be when they come on the platform to try to figure it out, 6 months or a year from now.
Let's talk about figuring it out. So, one of the things that I think we've seen again and again is growth is not linear. Insights don't come on any standard interval, and people get stuck. And, everybody in our audience who's running anything or is involved in a company, this stuff, most of the companies in the growth stage, there's still existential risk, right? This is kind of a do or die thing, even for larger companies. And we Violet Growth, we work with a variety of larger companies as well. They're maybe not in danger of going out of business, but they're certainly in danger of not hitting the plan. And so help me understand, or let's talk about an example or a story of a case where someone's come to you that's stuck. They can't figure out how to, it's flat. It's not working. They're trying to figure out how to break through. Walk me through your process of how you help people get out of that, and then what happened on the other side.
Yeah, there is this beautiful effect that I'm sure all of you are going to recognize, where you just have a second set of eyes and smart eyes looking at a problem that you've been trying to solve. This happened. There's a past client of ours. We worked with hired.com for about 6 years and had incredible success. But when they very first came to us, they had a lot of venture funding. And so they had a really hefty budget, very healthy that way. But they realized that what they were spending on was very inefficient. They were trying to gather candidates for senior technical roles. And, if it cost, $1,000 to acquire a lead, and maybe you actually capture one of these people ready to take one of your jobs for $4,000, that's really expensive for them. It could have been a lot cheaper. And so what I did is in taking the account on, I looked at the way that they had it set up, and I started trying to understand from the ground up, who is the audience you want to go after? Let's see if we can find more efficient ways of labeling them and targeting them. So now we're fixing the audience. Now let's look at what we're saying to each of these audiences. Can we say anything here more efficiently, more specific to a pain point they feel, or talk to them in a way that they know that we understand them? And, we made 20-30% efficiency increases in the targeting. And then we made 10-20% efficiencies in the messaging. We didn't even have to touch the landing pages. They were all already good. And then we work through, I told you, most people, if you don't know what you're doing on LinkedIn, you'll probably pay $20 to $40 per click. Whereas we're paying $7 to $8. So we're using those same bidding strategies of how can we be a lot more dialed in and getting the very best results at the lowest costs. And the results of, in just the next 6 months, it was so insanely successful that they ended up growing to become LinkedIn's largest spending account at the time. And once you find this recipe of what works, it's the right targeting, the right messaging, the right bidding and offers, then it becomes scalable. When you find success, you can just turn knobs up and go. And really the sky's the limit. As soon as you run out of people to target, that's the limit.
Right. That's fascinating. So essentially, and we see this too, if you can have incremental improvement all the way down the funnel, that adds up to a lot. And in fact, you don't have to be, sometimes a little bit of change goes a long way. I mean, you could be in a situation where you're in the money and now you're on your way, or you're stuck. Right. So let's take a moment as we look at the future here and what you're seeing coming on LinkedIn. They've got video shorts is something that they're starting to try to lean into more. Maybe we could take a moment on what your take is on the video short side. You think that's going to be something that's going to grow?
It's hard to say. The reason why they create the video shorts, like the video feed, is I'm not sure what they're going to call it yet. It's still in beta, but is because they want to copy TikTok. They want to have the same level of engagement that TikTok has. But I think what LinkedIn has always had going for it, it's always been the quiet hum in the background. It doesn't matter that, MySpace was the big thing, and then it was Facebook, and then it was Snapchat, and then it was TikTok. Like through all of those spikes and not being cool anymore, those platforms kind of returned to a quiet hum. LinkedIn has always been this quiet hum in the background where it's always the place that you go. There's no other, for professional purposes, there's no other competitor that way. It's there. So do I think that LinkedIn should be hopping on these trends and trying to capture this? Maybe you can make a case for it. They've got stockholders. But I think what makes LinkedIn really special is that it has the features that we need and the features we want to use. And it doesn't have to be the new big thing that everyone flocks to. So do I think so? Not really. I kind of think it might go the same way that stories went, where they released stories like Facebook did and then shut it down 6 months later. But we'll see. I don't mind being wrong.
But you said the video shorts, when you're promoting them, have performed well.
Yeah.
What's the difference there? Help me understand the difference.
If you have video shorts in your newsfeed, I think it's great. Like we're seeing some of the very best engagement come from video content, but what they came out with, and I don't even have access to it yet. It's been in beta for like 6 months. It's a whole separate video feed where it puts you in a TikTok style app where it's just video after video after video, and you're stuck in a loop. They want your time. They want you to get lost and watch all those videos. That's the one where I go, LinkedIn, I don't think you need to try to be TikTok. But I'm a huge fan of video content in the newsfeed for sure. I think that's going to last forever.
Got it. And I presume, what about infographics? Have you guys used those successfully?
Yeah, infographics are a little bit limited in scope. I find they work really well top of funnel because everyone wants to see a visual to help them understand, but you can't gate them. There aren't very many people who are willing to put in their information to see it. And so maybe top of funnel, it's a come view it. Maybe middle of funnel, it's, click to go to the landing page so we can then retarget you. But they're a little bit limited in their usage of that. That being said, they're a fantastic offer that you can put out there, and everyone's interested in seeing something visualized in a new way.
Yeah. Well, so let's one quick sidebar on gated versus ungated content. You've been an advocate of ungated content generally, but when is it appropriate, and how do you think about it in the mix?
I kind of brought that up, gating as like it's limited because you can't gate it. But you're right. I'm a huge proponent of ungating things, just because let's say I have a really great converting piece of content. If I gate it at the, in the very best of scenarios, I'm going to pay for 100 people to get to the page where they could see it. 30% are going to input their information and see it. 70% get turned away and go, oh, I guess I didn't want to read this company's thought leadership much anyway. So, really the goal, if you want to get someone to eventually be willing to talk to someone in sales, you really need to get them to know, like, and trust your brand. And that happens through making a connection, giving them value without asking for things in return. So if I have my druthers, I'm going to have all of my content in the top and middle of funnel be totally ungated. So I'm reaching as many people with it as possible, indoctrinating them, educating them, giving them value. And then only at the bottom do I ask for a form. I will say sometimes we'll have a client who just says, nope, we do gated content. That's what we do. And then we go, okay, well, let's introduce that at stage 2, this middle of the funnel.
Yeah. And so speaking again, coming around to people in that context, versus what do you think about this sort of trend towards AI spokespeople and versus beautiful face like yours and mine.
Boy, I have a face for radio, so it's really hard to hit that record button. But what I find, I actually did an AI video and I put it out there just to see if people could tell it was AI. And only one person of the 50 or 100 who commented were like, hey, that looks like AI. Even my wife and kids didn't realize until I told them. So AI is getting better. That being said, in personal interactions, if I ever get a message from someone I'm connected to, and I can tell that the message to me is automated in any way, or it's created by AI, and let's be honest, we can tell, it feels disingenuous. It almost feels like a slap to the face where, oh, they're trying to automate this relationship. Like, it doesn't matter whether I reply or not. They're just, I don't know. I'm just a number to them. And so I think as the whole world is going towards AI and it's getting better and better, and who knows, maybe someday it will be indistinguishable. I think during that time, the very best way that we can stand out as marketers, as brands, is to be the one that is unmistakably human while everyone else is spitting out stuff from bots.
Yeah. Fascinating. Any other future prediction? Like if you stared out a couple of years, 2-3 years, anything else you think people should keep in mind as they're trying to figure out how to get the most out of this type of channel?
It's kind of like cheating. I know LinkedIn watches Meta really carefully. And so if Meta comes out with something very successful, I know LinkedIn's going to have that about 4 years later. So I wouldn't be too surprised to be like, oh, okay, if I look at Meta right now, I can see what LinkedIn's going to be like in the future. But what I see them doing is making a lot of investments in in the tracking and measurement and attribution, because that's the problem that LinkedIn's had since the very beginning. They've always been an expensive platform. And so if you couldn't measure and tell what you were doing and that it was working, you'd go, whew, LinkedIn's too expensive and it doesn't work, and you'd leave. So they're making all of these investments in better tracking, better attribution, better integrations with other vendors who can provide a better look that way. I'm really excited about what they're building that way.
Yeah. I mean, what we know to be true, as we work with a variety of different folks who are larger, is that it can't, if you've got exceptional performance in a silo, that's great, but it all has to be in the context of everything else you're doing, because otherwise you can't really figure out how to scale and actually de-risk as well. The other thing, which I don't know if it's happened on LinkedIn, but plenty of people have gotten nasty surprises from Google and Meta. iOS 14, blew up whole businesses, right? And so you have to have a way to be able to think more broadly about what you're doing, and make sure that you can compare things, right? And we've found companies that invest in data infrastructure that is cross-channel, but is actually beyond marketing, is really a good understanding of normalizing sales KPIs, marketing KPIs, and financial KPIs, which is the piece that most companies don't do really well. In the end, is you have too many people trying to take credit for the sale, right? And so CFO's like, I don't know, if I took everybody's metrics, I should be 5 times bigger. Like, that's a problem. And so solving that problem is a critical part of being able to do two things, actually. One is understand how to have a productive conversation at the executive level, but actually also, and particularly in the context of the work that you're doing on LinkedIn, you can have a much more productive conversation about increasing investment without that friction of like, I understand in the context of what you're doing, there's more money to spend to continue to deliver these results, but I can't compare it to other things easily. So it just slows down the decision making. And so we found that that's a critical part, which, marketing analytics tools are not sufficient. You have to think more broadly in terms of your analytics.
Yeah. In fact, to your point, there was a report in the old Google Analytics. I'm not sure if it's in GA4 or not, but you could see the different pathways that people found they traveled on their way to a conversion. And I thought for sure, I had a client that was like, they had a really successful LinkedIn ads program. And I thought we'd see, LinkedIn ads touch conversion be the number one way that people found us. But it was like, that was like the 7th or the 8th on the list. And it was like LinkedIn ad, organic Google, then conversion, LinkedIn ad, email touch, Google search on, Google paid touch, then conversion. And I was blown away by the number of interactions with other platforms that I just wasn't seeing and I don't have control over. And I feel like, to your point, any sort of investment in the broader ecosystem, I can help someone have a killer LinkedIn ads program, but if they suck on every other network, they can still fail. But if all the channels are working together, you can have some great performance. And I don't care who takes credit for that.
No, right. Well, and it doesn't actually, it's all, it takes a village, as they say. But I think actually part of the critical part of that is that it works until it doesn't. So what often happens, what you're describing, which I think is really, and again, thank you so much for making the time, because it's just fascinating, is we also see this best practices by experienced operators on a channel by channel basis is critical, because LinkedIn ain't Google, ain't Meta, ain't Taboola. They're different, right? And you have to have that expertise in that area. And if you are able to optimize by channel with best practice, you can get pretty far down the track, actually, right? But there's a point at which you can't get past that. And so when we're thinking about long-term growth, it's about being able to have great operators in each of your channels who understand how to get the most out of that channel, and then being able to see it as a whole. So then you can figure out how to get that next dollar to get the highest return. And that, at a business level, at an enterprise value level, what happens is, instead of doing this, you're able to keep going and because you found the next leg. One of the things that we've seen is these are liquid markets, right? And so you can be in a situation where you're in the money now, and then you're not in the money, and then you're in the money again. Have you found that to be true at LinkedIn, where you obviously have variance in conversion and performance?
Kind of, not quite the same waves, but we have seen really prominent user behavior shifts where we went, oh, the thing that worked for everyone a year ago is not working still.
Yeah, right.
Like, we need to pivot. I would say about 5 years ago, it used to be that the majority of brands could share gated content to cold audiences. They would grab it, then BDRs would reach out to them and try to start up a sales conversation. And that worked until about 5 years ago. And then it seemed like there was this shift of people saying, you know what, just because I downloaded a piece of your content doesn't mean I want to talk to a sales rep. And that shifted. Then about 3 years ago, video, it was like I would run video ads on LinkedIn and they would perform terribly and I wrote it off. But here in the last 2 years, we've seen video performing incredibly well. And I think that's because we as users, we've gotten accustomed to now coming to LinkedIn for information. We're spending more time there. And so watching a video fits really nicely in with our paradigm. So I think we're going to keep seeing those big paradigm shifts. But as for riding the wave, I mean, LinkedIn is surprisingly stable. You might see over time, your results are slightly declining as competitors are entering the market and getting better. But as long as you're constantly getting little improvements here and there, I think LinkedIn's just a roller coaster that you get to ride and stay steady.
Okay. So what's the paradigm right now? Videos working. What's like 2025? What do you think the playbook is in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think it has to be this 3-stage funnel that I've talked about, where the first stage is something very personal. If it's text or video from you as one of the company founders, leaders, your voice is more meaningful. That's a first touch. We also see that documents, if you put together like a slide presentation that teaches them something, anyone who interacts with that, great first touch. Then maybe at the middle, the second stage where someone's already interacted, maybe you're giving them deeper content, like join a webinar, read this guide, a blog post, subscribe to our podcast, things like that. And then at the bottom, that's when we finally get to ask them to, hey, you ought to talk to sales and get a free consultation or a free strategy session, whatever you want to call it. And if you do this 3-stage funnel right, it takes 2-3 months of getting traffic built up to where your bottom of the funnel is now starting to kick out leads. So it takes a while. There's no shortcuts. But the nice thing is, once you have this machine built, it really is a machine. You keep feeding, it keeps growing this bottom of the funnel audience who now becomes the reliable sales ready talking to leads out the bottom.
Love it. AJ, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. It's been my honor. Thank you for having me on.